with this thing and do service work and whatnot. So for this, I need to actually have a teardrop shaped like attachment point with a bolt securing it to the exterior of the chassis. So to do that, I'm just going to kind of hop in here and just guess at where it's going to be, because I have no visual indication of where it's going to sit. The only real way to figure that out would be to make a multi. You know what? Actually, I'll show you guys how to do that. This is fun. So what we'll do here is make ourselves a brand new multi-normal. Let's see, pull this down. Now, feel free to type if you don't want to talk or anything. I mean, you guys can talk if you feel like it. But have any of you guys actually used the multi-normal feature of Endo before? Or if you're new to it, I mean, there's no shame in admitting it. We all got to start somewhere. But the multi-normal feature is freaking amazing. Like, this is one of the only tools where you can literally paint a normal map directly onto your model. And that's actually what I'm going to set up right now. So what you do inside of Endo is you actually create a new multi-normal. And from there, you go ahead and enable Endo Painter mode. And what that's going to do is tell 3Do to initialize the 3D Painter, which will then replace the Baking tab with the Painter tab. Okay. Now up here on this Painter tab, which should pop up any second now, it's going to take a little bit longer because this is an 8K project. Now I can actually literally paint directly on this mesh at any point I feel like it. So I'm in masked mode by pressing M. There we go. So I actually have a little crappy circle thing. Hit shift space. And once that gets accepted and gets turned into a normal map, voila, there you are. There's now a normal map there that I just painted in 3D. That's pretty sweet. And you can do a lot of stuff with this. Essentially, what I like to do is I like to use this for welding. I'm more of a fan of doing precision work in Photoshop versus painting in 3D. Mostly because, to be dead honest with you guys, there are a couple of issues left with 3D where shrinking down to the level of detail where I paint, where I tend to paint pixels at a time occasionally. You will get some artifacting from trying to shrink your brush size down too far. I'll actually give you a demonstration if you want to see. So if I go down and shrink this down to where I normally paint this kind of stuff, you can see that there's some pixelation there. Even worse as I try to paint. So definitely doesn't look like a circle anymore. And some of that's from, obviously, from it being an aliased, or sorry, anti-aliased, like, circle that gets turned into a square, because I'm just painting pixels literally at this point. But if you were to use, like, say I used a pattern. So if I go to load up one of these patterns up here, and I might actually have one of them loaded up from before. Here we are. There's my little weld brush. So if I paint my weld here, right, that looks pretty cool. Shrink that down by about 50%. It doesn't look too bad still. Shrink that down another 50%. That is not a weld. And neither is that. And that is definitely not a weld. That's just a pixel. So the interpolation of the brushes right now it's a little lacking. But if you don't intend to work in microscopic res like I do, then it's not really a problem. But for what we're going to do, I'm actually going to use this to just eyeball where this stupid shape's going to be. I cannot figure out where it's going to be for the life of me. So I don't like to do guesswork. I like to just come in here and just know it's going to be right above this circle. So click there and click there. And then I hit shift space to apply that. Now you'll notice that the other circle that I painted prior is gone as soon as this updates, because I cleared the mask out. And literally all this is doing is creating a white mask. And this mask gets translated over to Photoshop. So anything that gets translated to Photoshop will then update in 3D. So it's really just painting in 2D because I cleared the mask out. It's kind of ingenious when you think about it. So from here, I can now go back to the viewer, into Photoshop itself. Now I got these two dots here. And I know exactly where I need to put this stuff. Isn't that cool? I'm going to delete that in a second, but so you can actually see my layer stack here, and you can actually see what I'm working with. Let me pull this over. So this is the layer I'm talking about. You actually have to be working within this paint layer of your multi-normal for anything that you paint in 3D to get applied. And if you alt-click on that layer, you actually see the mask. And even those perfect circles are a little iffy looking. when you shrink them down too much. So again, they're just being used as placeholders just to know exactly where this piece is going to go. So I'm going to stuff my layers back where they were before. I'm going to create a shape. And I don't even want the path itself. I just want to make a selection from it. So do this with a square. I can do this with a circle. It doesn't really matter. I need to get my properties menu. So properties here, and the newer versions of Photoshop, if you have CC 2014 and up, you can actually have what's called a live shape, which allows you to edit the verts of every one of your shapes. So I just turn that thing into a circle, essentially, just by typing in random numbers, or whatever you want it to be. So if I need 1 pixel of rounding, 4 pixels, 16 pixels, it doesn't matter. This is going to be a circle. This is what I need it to be. But I also need this to be kind of a teardrop shape, because this is going to more like that. Now I'm going to then turn this into a selection, make a new group, new layer. So inside of Photoshop here, make a new layer, call it, it doesn't really matter, teardrop shape, why not? In the selection, we're going to turn this selection into a normal map. I don't want to work with vectors. Some of you might be wondering why I'm not working with vectors. I will tell you, having worked in vectors for a long time with Photoshop, this program does not like working with a lot of them. You'll bog it down pretty quickly. I tried making entire patterns and stuff out of vectors, and after about the 100th one inside of your document, it slows down like crazy. So back to, oh, and by the way, if you do work with a path like I did and you didn't delete the path, you'll have this, which this is Endo asking you to convert that path to a normal document. So on your Paths tab, you have to go in here and actually delete that. And you can delete the other one too. Now this turns back into what it's supposed to be. Just in case you're wondering what that was. And it's one of the more obnoxious things about Photoshop is that it leaves paths up in the background even if you don't want them. All right, so this needs to be set to a size of about 2 or 1. Let's go with 1. Back over here to 3Do, make sure that I actually place this thing where it's supposed to be. And look at that, pretty close, except this piece needs to come down just a little bit. But I don't have to eyeball it too much. So there's that. Now I don't need this little reference piece here anymore, so what I'm going to do is go back up to, I'm just going to leave all this stuff up here so you guys can see it. Go back up to my multi-normal here, and then select that, and whoops, wrong color. Wrong color again. But we just hit clear. There we go. That worked. So now that that's out of the way, I can drag this and maybe even make it a little bit bigger. Actually, it wasn't bad. Just a little bit bigger. And since I scaled what was essentially a raster shape, there might be a little bit of blurriness there, but your average user is never going to see it. It's just not going to happen. So I need to go back to my normal group here, and I forgot to turn off Endo Painter mode. So, and by the way, if you guys do work with the Endo Painter, try and keep in mind that just clicking Endo Painter mode off is not going to apply your paint. You actually have to press Shift plus Spacebar. If you don't press those two items and you exit out of Endo Painter mode, you lose your mask. Everything you paint, it's gone. So make sure that you hit Shift Spacebar before you do that to accept what you've painted, which is why this is still here, because I hit Shift Spacebar. Okay, so on this little teardrop shape thing, I'm going to toggle sculpt mode to go back into it. Grab that, hold down Alt, hold down Shift, so I drag up, make a copy of it, and stick it right there. Now back to the normal group, because I don't need that thing there anymore. And it's gone. Now I can turn off sculpt mode for teardrop shape. And that turns it back into a regular normal map. And if everything went according to plan, which I believe it did, or relatively close enough to plan, that is, that's actually pretty close to what they look like on an actual railroad. So now what it needs is a bolt. This thing needs to be secured, otherwise somebody's going to step on that and they're going to break their head open. We can't really have that. So go to this thing called 6 side. This is my container layer for all of my bolt shapes. Really, it's just called six-side because that's what I worked with originally, was a six-sided bolt. I just kind of name layers without like leaving them as random names. I'll be doing more of these things too, so like you might want to get used to some of the way I talk and work. I'm very, very particular about how I do things, and I like to make sure that my layers are named, so when I go back and look at them as random names, 15 years from now, I know exactly what I'm looking at. I don't have to guess these things too, so like, you might want to get used to some of the way I actually mean something. But here's a fun problem. This is actually below the other one. Now what we could do is we could shove the six-side bolt above that, or we could do this. Put that at the bolt there. They're still sitting behind it, but if I take the teardrop shape here and set the plane fill to 0, the bolt will pop right through it. See? Now plane fill essentially takes the blue channel and removes it entirely, which is awesome because you can do a variety of effects with it, and you don't have to rely on overlay, for example, to blend through it. Because this blue color is actually literally just 50% gray, which means you can throw an overlay on it and it will not bleed through color. But these other colors here will. So if you're not familiar with that, it's one of the nice things about working with normal maps is that there's so many different things you can do with them to combine them and kind of sculpt them into whatever you want them to be. And a lot of that comes down to understanding how to overlay them correctly, or in Endu's case, using plane fill or the variety of different blend modes that you have at your disposal to work. So now I've got those two pieces there. You know, there's a bolt there. Now somebody can step on this and nobody's going to get fired or have an OSHA complaint sent to them. So there we go. Now, for those of you guys who just came in, this all was done in about 20 minutes. This entire set of panels I made. One set of everything, really. This is the same selection, just duplicated over and over, and just copied and pasted all over the place. And if things go really well, I could probably do this to the most of this train. Like, I don't have to spend a terrible amount of time reinventing the wheel. Like, every time I see a hinge, I know I can go back to my hinge layer, enter sculpt mode, and grab it and drag and drop it to where it needs to be. It's just I don't want to call it an intelligent way to work because it's kind of like denigrating the way people work. I just want to say it's a very quick way to work. And it's also accurate too, because you keep consistency between things. You don't have to keep making 10 different hinges. You don't have to make 10 different panels, 10 different hinge holders, 10 different bolts. You can make 1 or 2, depending on how many you actually need, and work with that. And it saves you a lot of time in the long run. Now, these pieces here should also be over here. I don't really feel like doing that right now, so I'm going to look for something else to work on in the meantime. That's just a lot of drag and drop and fiddling with stuff to figure out what's going to work. So what else could I work on in this thing? There's actually a panel that pops out of here that I had set up in geometry, but then I got rid of it. So I think I'll go back to that and add it in there again. So get that out of the way. Go back to mouse. Actually sit because I don't really feel like deciphering my DB map right now. And if I enter my selection face mode, it tells me sitting right there.
Hey John, your voice has gone all roboto, by the way.
Hold on a second. Thanks for the heads up. Does that sound better now, I hope?
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. All right, so this piece here is in the upper quadrant. It's pretty easy to spot. I mean, this thing's kind of distinctive looking anyway. So I'm going to take that. Actually, what I'm going to do as a selection, because I really don't feel like making something else. I want to be a little bit more lazy today. So we'll set this to 8192. And by the way, I'm using Poly Unwrapper 4.03, which makes this like a piece of cake. So rendering the selected faces. Faces are white, edges are white. Hit render selected. And now I get a gigantic 8K mask. Copy the mask, go back to Photoshop. And then what I can do now, and this is fun too, by the way, paste. I've got a mask here. And this is basically perfect, except it's not. There's a slight bit of UV distortion there from that face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quick mask select that thing, select inverse, delete everything but that, and then clean this up just a little bit so there's no fuzzy edges or anything else. In all reality, at this point, I probably could have just made a selection really quick and just save myself all this extra work, but when you're talking about a couple of seconds of work, it's not that big of a deal. Flat protruding box, and then convert this over to a normal. Now be aware, like I mentioned earlier with bolts, if anything is black and you convert it to black from raster, it's going to turn invisible. You'll have a layer literally made of nothing, so don't do that. I'll show you what happens if you're not familiar. So I got a selection here, I make a new layer, fill that with white, actually black, apparently that's the color I had selected. I don't even know where my toolbar went. So this is black, right? So hit that, convert it, and there will be absolutely nothing there. That is nothing. So if you ever wonder what happened to your layer, it's because you're working in black. Try to make sure that you work with at least a value of anything that's not black, essentially. That's just the way the suite handles things. So at least with the way Endu handles stuff, it's going to discard black values, which is actually really cool because the vast majority of, what do you call them? ZBrush alphas are black in the background. So all you have to do is just grab an alpha and just go hog wild with it. Like, for example, I've got a nice collection of different height maps and stuff in here. And everything here that's black gets discarded by the suite. So I can literally just grab whatever I want and just drag and drop it and place it. And skill factor is not that, not that high doing that, but you've made most of this stuff already. You're not really impressing anyone by making it all over again for no particularly good reason, unless you want to. In which case, have fun. But personally, I'd like to just get this stuff done and move on to the dedo part. Not that I don't like doing this, but it's nice that there's, pre-made stuff that you can just grab. It's just like going to the hardware store at this point. Like you go to the hardware store to buy a screw. You don't go to make your own screw and screw everything in your house with the screws that you made yourself, you know what I mean? So, back to the box. This one's going to stick out a little bit further, say 4 pixels, and set that to emboss, because I want it to be a little stronger. And if we go back to Endu here, or sorry, 3do, there's so many do's to keep track of. Now my box is sticking out on the top. And again, if you didn't know that wasn't geometry, it'd probably be kind of hard to tell, at least from a distance anyway. You get up closer and the illusion is kind of destroyed. But it doesn't look that bad, I don't think. Now this is one of the few things on here I didn't mirror. And in retrospect, I probably should have mirrored this, so this was identical on both sides. Would have saved me some extra texture space. But I'm working in NK, and I've mirrored a bunch of stuff as it is, so I think I can get away with having a little bit of extra stuff to play with here. Oh crap, I'm getting bombarded with Facebook messages. Oh, somebody blocked Linus on Hangouts, and now he's banned. That's awesome. Those of you who didn't see, Linus was hanging out with us earlier. Or was. Until he got banned for reasons unknown and yet to be determined. Okay, so I need to figure out where the other box is at. So I'm going to go to the side, grab that piece, and open up my unwrap window, wherever it went. There it is. And that one's down in the lower left. That's easy enough. So I can go back to this protruding box, enter sculpt mode, make a lasso selection, Alt-Shift-Drag to move it straight down, and make a duplicate of it. And then drag it down to where it needs to be. And I can see my UVs. Just kind of shove that in place. All is right with the world. Turn that off. And deselect. And exit sculpt mode, which then automatically zips, at least if you have the automatic zip set up, which is in your preferences here under performance, I believe. Nope, it's actually under normal creation, auto zip. Get used to zipping. Zipping is one of the fastest ways to fix up your speed in this program, especially just like Endu responsiveness and Photoshop responsiveness. If you're not familiar with zipping, this is what it does. It condenses everything down into this map right here. So I can take this and rotate it. Oh, actually, not so easy. Let me just do it from this selection. There we go. But I can rotate this, and you'll notice that the normal direction isn't changing. So what should be green is now purple. But if I unzip that, it actually breaks it back down into its component pieces. Now, instead of having one layer here, I now have one for every single color. So if I take this, well, there's no easy way to do this, so I'll just zoom in here. If I rotate that, you'll notice that the color will stay green no matter what, no matter how you do it, no matter how you change it. Let's just make a new layer for this. It's a little easier to explain. That one's got too many pieces on the other side of the board here to keep track of. There we go. And then turn that into a normal, and then just rotate it around. Okay, so in the case of this extreme god-awful looking object, and rotate this, and you'll notice the colors are shifting with it as I rotate. So no matter what I do with this, this will always be accurate on the normal map. Now, if I flatten that into a zipped endu document, what will then happen is this will now be backwards. So if I go to here and put it in here, and then go back to 3Do, force it to update, you'll then see that this is not pointing the correct direction. So if you ever notice this on your projects, this is what happened. See that? That should not look like that. We can make it even worse by literally, well, not literally, I say that word too much. There we go. That, so then none of the colors are in the correct direction. Actually, try that. There we go. That's probably more like it. Okay, come on back over here, 3D. So as I rotate this, see how the light is coming from the wrong direction entirely? Lighting up from the side and the bottom and stuff. That's just not even close to what it should look like. So if you ever see that, keep in mind that's probably because you're in zip mode and you didn't unzip before you moved. And really, it's not a big problem. You can just hit unzip and then rezip, and it should fix everything back up to where it should be. And I'm going to wrap this up here in a few minutes because I'm going to keep working on this thing over the week. So I'll probably do this again tomorrow night. But if you guys got any questions or anything, feel free to ask. Before I wrap this up. You don't have to type if you don't want to. Yeah. So, good getting to chat with you guys. Me, I'm on, just so you know, I'm on the East Coast of the United States in Florida. So I am GMT -5, which means that right now for me it's 10:12. So I usually get on about 2 hours ago. So I've been on since about 2 hours ago. Yeah, after I get off of work and whatnot and come back home and start working for Quixel, that's about 2 hours from this point is when you should expect me to be online. Except on weekends, I usually dedicate Saturday mornings to about a couple hours worth of hangout time. And I'll do stuff like this and try to engage with people and answer questions and all that fun stuff. So, and again, you're always welcome to ask anything if you guys need help with anything. I'm always on Facebook. You can always get a hold of me, unless I'm sleeping, in which case you can't, obviously. So, yeah, it's a good chat with you guys. I'm going to head off for the night. So, see y'all on Facebook.